Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to be around the world and around Australia. My name's Mark. I run the Purple Penny with my wife Catherine. It's a coin shop in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, which is the capital of South Australia. It's Anzac Day today, and those of you who aren't Australian, Anzac Day is a commemoration of when the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps landed at Gallipoli in 1915, so that's 107 years ago. It's a public holiday here in Australia today, so Catherine and I have popped into the shop today to get a few things done and to have to put the video on, because we do enjoy doing it every Monday. Catherine's just out there packaging things up, as she always seems to be. I hope everyone in Australia is enjoying their day off, and those of you who managed to get to a dawn service today, well done, and anyone who's watching who has served for Australia or New Zealand, thank you for your service. So today we're just doing a bit of a Anzac Day special, and if you've been watching my videos or followed us on Facebook, you're probably going to guess what it's about, but we'll save that for a bit later. Right, let's say hello to a few people. Hello Sharon, Paul, Glennis, Jason, John, Mike, Patrick, Ogie, Greg, Alison, Rob, HC, and Andy. Hello everyone, thanks for joining in today. Right, what's been going on this week? It was a pretty normal week here this week. We bought some stuff, we sold some stuff, nothing remarkable that came in. A little bit of gold on Friday, some sovereigns and a 1 ounce gold coin, but numismatically not a whole lot of interest. Those of you who do follow our Facebook would have seen that I bought a helmet on Thursday, which I've never bought a helmet before, so as you can see it's put a smile on my face. And then on Friday someone brought in a cricket bat, a signed cricket bat from the 1972 Adelaide Oval Australia versus the rest of the world test match, which I've never had one of those before either, so it was good to buy a couple of new things last week, even though neither of them have anything to do with coins. Right, let's jump into the news. Just a follow on from last week with regards to the B rolls and the BC mint marks. I thought it would be worth just following up on that. So last week I reported the sales results for rolls at about $150 to $200, and the C mint marks for between $20 and $30. In the last week those prices have climbed, so the rolls are now consistently selling between $180 and $220, and the C mint marks between $25 and $35. Now I don't know why they're going up. They've got higher issue numbers than any of the previous coins. The B coins are definitely going into circulation, so you know the rolls aren't going to be the only way that you can get hold of them. But psychology is a strange thing, and people are definitely paying more for them, which is just all a bit strange. About 3 weeks ago I mentioned a metal detectorist had been leaving holes all over school ovals and sports grounds up in the Adelaide Hills here. Those of you who do metal detecting would know that you're supposed to clean up after yourself and fill in your holes and only detect where you've got permission, and definitely not damage public property. And this person chose not to comply with that good practice, and as such has been arrested and charged with damage to public property and released on bail. If you're not sure what you should be doing, if you're thinking about metal detecting, do think about joining a metal detecting club near you, and you will be educated on the right way about going about things. Coin news is a bit light on this week. The only thing that really popped up that was of any interest to me was a metal that was detected on a riverbank in the UK. It was a 1914 Mons Star. The medal had been lost by the gentleman who had lost it in World War One. He'd lost it at a picnic, and he'd won it in World War One. And we'll just show you what the Mons Star looks like. It's something that was only awarded to the British Expeditionary Force in World War One who served between, let me think, August 1914 and November 1914, which were the conflicts in Belgium mostly. So I'm not sure if any Australians have been awarded this particular medal, certainly not as part of the AIF, I wouldn't have thought. But this was medal detected on a riverbank. It had been lost by the person who'd won it at a picnic many years ago, and the people who found it managed to track down the descendants of the gentleman who'd won it and hand it back. And they are always good news stories when those things happen. And I did notice just on my Facebook feed before about a gentleman in Victoria who located some relatives for a medal that he found in storage. So it's always good, I guess, to try and track these people down if you can. Right, we'll just jump back to the news here. The Adelaide Coin Expo, I think I might have fluffed up the dates last week, not thinking and talking too quickly. So the Adelaide Coin Expo is happening. The first planning meeting was held this week, and it is happening on the first weekend in October. That's October 1st, 2nd and 3rd, and it's a long weekend. It's Saturday, Sunday and Monday. Free admission, free parking, nearly 90 tables that are sold out. The Mint is in negotiations with the Numismatic Society of South Australia to come along. If they do come along, they will not be making a big deal out of it, so I doubt whether there will be any coin swaps or show specials or anything like that. But it is definitely going ahead, and we are super psyched about it. We will be there. We have tables right by the entry door, and there will be dealers from all over Australia attending. So if you are able to get in, please do get in and take part, because it's been 3 years since we've had a show here in Adelaide, and there will be a lot of cool stuff available and a lot of cool stuff to look at. Right, let's just have a look at some comments here. Yeah, Graham says thanks to everyone that served. Yes, we pass on those wishes. Thanks, Graham, for saying that. Brendan saying that people are paying high prices for rolls because they're not very smart. Well, I don't usually like to comment on people's intelligence, but I suspect it's people chasing money. So, if you're going to chase money, I guess prepare to get your fingers burnt. And, Greg Gibbons says, great to see attribution given the medal image. I do try to attribute all the images that we use here. Where possible, we use our own images. Where not, we try to use Wikimedia images, and where that's not possible, then we do always give acknowledgement to where we source an image from. Good morning, Ian. How are you, mate? Right, topic of the week. This is on the back of a collecting area that I have, and I guess as you get more and more into coins, you tend to specialise your collecting interests. Certainly I do, and sort of I'm at the point now where there isn't a whole lot that I do collect, but what I do collect is I collect military identity discs that are made out of coins, and some years I might buy 2, some years I might buy 10, and other years I don't buy any. They are pretty thin on the ground, and I find them very interesting simply because they are, I guess, little mundane, fairly historical items. So I'm in the middle of writing we're in the middle of writing a paper about these things at the moment, and I just thought I'd share some of those with you. So we'll just jump into the first item here. Now, coins that are made into decorative items could be regarded as trench art, and those of you who know what trench art is, you're probably sort of more used to seeing trench art being this sort of thing. So trench art is art that's made from really anything that's available, and that could be scraps of metal, leftover ordnance like this, souvenirs taken on the battlefield, and it's something that has been around for thousands of years. So this is like a jug that's made out of I think it's a French 75mm artillery shell, and it's crudely engraved on the side with Ypres, which is a battlefield in World War One. Trench art's been around for thousands of years. There's been sort of fashioned items found on battlefields dating back thousands of years, but anyone who's been in the field is probably more familiar with stuff that pops up from World War One and World War Two. And you can make trench art out of coins, and soldiers absolutely did. Why do soldiers make trench art? I guess it's, and there's a quote there that's saying that trench art is the holders of soldiers' memories and reminders of the conflict they faced. They are a reminder of possibly one of the most traumatic events in someone's lives, certainly, perhaps the most momentous events in someone's lives, and it's not unusual for soldiers, men and women, to take souvenirs. So what does an elaborate coin look like that has been made into a beautiful piece of trench art? There's one there that you can see. It's made out of an Egyptian 50 piastres coin, and a 50 piastres coin is a high value silver coin. And what sort of value? You're talking about a day's wages there. That's about the equivalent value of a 50 piastres silver coin, a day's wages for a World War One soldier. So in today's money, you're probably talking about a coin that's worth a day's wages today, $150. So you're not talking about an inconsequential item there. And it's been this particular item has been skillfully engraved. And was it engraved by the soldier? Almost certainly not engraved by the soldier, and that's key to understand about trench art. It's not necessarily the soldier who holds it has actually made it. These were made in workshops by civilians, by people in the rear areas, not necessarily made by the troops themselves. So someone's skimmed off this coin and engraved it with a gentleman's name. It's Patrick Donahoe, and his service number and the unit that he served in, the Anzac Mounted Division, and then a number of years. So the fact that it shows the number of years there is a sign that this was made probably at the end of the war. And it was made by Patrick Donahoe as a reminder of what he went through during the war, and no doubt he took this back to Australia with him. This gentleman was from Sydney, and from time to time looked at it as a reminder of what he went through. And serving in the Middle East was difficult. There was a lot of disease and a lot of illness, and it would have been a very difficult time for this man. But this person, he has encompassed, I guess, the entire experience into a beautifully little engraved coin like this. It is a beautiful piece of trench art and a souvenir of one of life's forming experiences. So this is one type of ID disc that you see. These are not very commonly found with Australian names and service numbers on them. They are found quite commonly with British names and service numbers on them, but Australian names and service numbers not so much, and they do tend to be found a lot from the Middle East, from Palestine and Egypt and places like that. So clearly there was a lot of skilled craftspeople there. Now, Ian's just asked an interesting question. What was used before dog tags? Right, so Ian, the idea of identifying soldiers after they were killed on the battlefield is a relatively new one, and the idea of burying them in individual graves is also a relatively new one. Before sort of World War One and the Boer War, it was common after a battle unfortunately for all of the killed service people to be just gathered up and buried in a mass grave unidentified. So the British Army and the Australian Army during World War One were learning as they went along. So the British Army had an identity disc specified in 1907, and the Australian Army adopted that same practice, and that was a single aluminium identity disc that looked like that. So it's a light aluminium identity disc, and it's engraved with the person's name, their religion, their service number, and their unit. Okay, so that was what was worn up until 1916, and then in 1916 the British Army adopted another ordinance, and the Australian Army followed followed suit, and they adopted these sorts of tags here, and these are compressed fibre tags. There's 2 of them, and they were to be worn on a leather strap like this one here. And the idea being that if you were killed, that your body could be identified. One tag would be taken and the other one left on your body, and that way, you know, you wouldn't lose track of who you were. Now, it's hard to believe that the idea of burying soldiers individually has only come about really in the 20th century, because if you do look at some newspapers from the time, you'll see that there was an article posted in a newspaper, in several newspapers around Australia, and it was about the horrors of war. And these were the horrors of war were not talked about much in World War One. It was supposedly a glorious exercise for king and country, but of course it was a horrific experience for those who went through it. And you find very little information, first-hand information published in newspapers and so on about the troubles that soldiers went through, certainly in diaries and things like that. But to find an article like this, and you can see what the article says there: many soldiers have a horror of losing their identification discs, or of being unidentified if they are killed or buried in a nameless grave. So, you know, this was troubled the minds of people who served, was getting killed, and getting killed in World War One was often meant, unfortunately, the obliteration of your body, and you couldn't clean up, you couldn't police the battlefield for months afterwards. So as a result, there were many tens of thousands of soldiers that were killed with no known grave. Now, how many? There were 46,000 soldiers killed serving for Australia in World War One, and 18,000 of those have no known grave. So more than a third, a bit less than a half. British Commonwealth casualties, almost half of the British Commonwealth casualties of 1 million soldiers have no known grave. And you know, perhaps that has something to do with the identification discs, perhaps it doesn't. Anyway, because soldiers were only using these light aluminium discs prior to 1916, it wasn't unusual for soldiers to fashion their own identity discs and wear them on different locations on their body, and also on their kit or their uniforms or their bags or whatever. And you do often see a lot of very crude of coins that have been made into identification discs purely for the reason of identification. They're not elaborate, they're not well fashioned, they are just so that the person can be identified. And we'll just have a look at one of those here. So this is an identity disc up the top there. It's fashioned out of a French bronze coin. It's been very crudely stamped on one side with the gentleman's name, Berry, and his service number, 76, and then AIF on the reverse. So this is probably the absolute minimum that would be required to be able to identify this man. And then below that on the same chain is a white metal Canterbury Cathedral medallion. Now this disc belongs to James Berry, who enlisted in the middle of 1915 and shipped to Egypt in December 1915. He landed the day after Christmas 1915. He was put in hospital in early January 1916 and unfortunately died about 3 weeks later in hospital from pneumonia. So this is a really interesting pair of items, because the ID disc really encompasses that horror of dying unidentified, but the Canterbury Cathedral medallion is, I guess, expresses the hope that the gentleman was going to survive the war. And unfortunately, in this case, he did not. So for me, this is probably one of the most, I guess, poignant things that I've accumulated over the years, because it's really despair and hope in one pair of items. Yeah, it's quite an emotional thing. Right, so the last type of disc that we were going to cover today is what I call a forget-me-not disc, and these are things that are unique to South Australia. These are types of forget-me-not coins that were fashioned at workshops here in South Australia. It's important to understand that these were made here in Australia. They weren't made on the battlefields, and they were given as, I guess, as keepsakes to loved ones here in South Australia. So as such, you do find a lot of them. Well, a lot. They are mostly found here in Adelaide, and not necessarily found overseas, because they often were not taken overseas. As I said, they were made here in camps in Adelaide and distributed to loved ones. And you can link a lot of these together because they were made by the same die and punch sets. You can find broken letters and things like that are common across them. So Peter Lane, who's a numismatist here in South Australia and actually manages the Art Gallery of South Australia's coin collection, he wrote a great article on these. And he says that forget-me-not pennies are base metal coins which have been hammered with letter and numeral punches to record a farewell message between people. And he's right. They're all the ones that I've seen are Australian or British pennies. Sometimes they've been silvered. So we'll just show you one that has been silvered here. So you can see there you've got a silvered penny where one side has been skimmed off and the reverse has been stamped with letters, and it says "Forget Me Not from Fred with fond love to Kitty 2815." So Fred has had this made in a workshop, and he's had it silvered and a loop put on it, and he's given it to someone with by the name of Kitty, and she has kept that. I can't remember where I got this from, but I went through every service person I could find with the service number 2815 and everyone called Fred, and I happened to find one record where there was a letter in the records from someone called Kitty Pantzer, Pantzer, asking the War Records Office for some details on a serviceman called Fred George Gifford. So I'm about 99% certain that this forget-me-not penny was created by Frederick George Gifford. And interestingly, Frederick George Gifford served in the battlefields in Europe, and then in 1918 was sent to England to do a engineer's course, and he was sent back to Australia along with a tank, and that tank is a Mark IV female British tank. That tank toured around Australia in 1918 to help raise money for the war efforts, and then it continued to tour in 1919 to continue to raise money to help pay off war loans. And the tank had no name. In 1918 it was sent to Adelaide, and there was a demonstration at Unley Oval, which is where the Sturt Football Club play, and they dug up the oval and made an obstacle course for the tank to trundle around, and Fred was one of the crew members of that tank. And there was a competition held at Unley Oval when the tank was there, and you could pay an entry fee and come up with a name for the tank. And the tank was named Grit by someone who won some money to name the tank. And interestingly, the tank is still viewable at the Australian War Memorial. So that very tank that Fred Gifford, who had this forget-me-not token made, Fred Gifford was a crewman in it, is still viewable at the Australian War Memorial. So, the motivations behind making this token, Fred did it to provide a keepsake for Kitty, who presumably was a girlfriend or perhaps a close female friend, and it was kept as a keepsake by Kitty to help her remember Fred. Forget-me-not tokens are not an unusual thing. You do see them from lots of English-speaking countries from the 17th and 18th centuries. But this is a uniquely South Australian variety of forget-me-not token. Right, so that's it. So I do collect these, and Catherine and I do research the people that are behind them and publish articles about them, because I think it's important to remember some of these people or remember the people. And often the information for them is scattered across many sources, so we like to pull all that together and publish it online so that they are remembered, and there is some, I guess, reminder of them. We've for many of these people, we've tried to locate current relatives, and often there are no current relatives. There are no online records beyond the military records, and that's a great shame. And then often other times we'll buy them off of people because they're just going to get thrown away, and for me that's a bit sad. But it's a honour to be a temporary custodian of them, and when it comes time to move them on, no doubt we'll move them on to a location that looks after them properly. Right, that's it for today. Let's have a look at if anyone said anything. Hello Michael. Patrick, having the document with it increases the value. Yeah, that's right, Patrick. If you've got any paperwork with war medals and ID discs, it's best to keep them all together. If you are a family member thinking about disposing of war medals and things like that, do consider donating them to the RSL or the War Memorial. Now, while they might not get put on display, you sort of guarantee that they will be hopefully kept together. Alternatively, if you can find a collector who's not a reseller, then they'll be kept together by that collector as well. Ian says he thought that the official discs would be easy to lose and getting a replacement would have been almost impossible. Ian, I believe that there were workshops that were making these discs not on the front lines but behind the front lines, so you could get replacement discs, but certainly replacing them with ones that are fashioned out of coins or scraps of metal would have been fairly easy. And you do see ID bracelets and things like that that are fashioned out of scraps of metal. No worries, Jay. Pleased to share. No worries, Michael, and thanks, Greg. So, everyone, please enjoy the rest of your day here in Australia if you're having a public holiday. Hopefully, you don't have to go into work like we do. And stay safe and well. As always, we're looking for topics for these videos. If you've got a topic, please email it or give us a call or contact us through Facebook any way at all. We're always looking for things to talk about. Stay safe, everyone. Happy collecting. Bye for now.